Joe Brook in this one. Very well-known Thrasher magazine photographer. Takes some really cool photos on film. And I don't know, has anybody heard of Joe Brook before? Maybe a few out there. Yeah, he's very interesting perspectives on what he shoots. So
some vinyl on my van, and I was like, yeah, do it on.
We're gonna stop at Big Blue because we don't need to learn all the history of his van today. As cool as that van is with an absolutely massive flag on it. So one of the interesting things with Joe Brook is his use of film cameras in much of his photography, including, you may have seen him shoot or loading film into the first camera, which is a Hasselblad X-Pan. It's a panoramic camera, which is very rare to shoot skateboarding on or see really any photos for that. It's gonna be more of his personal stuff than anything for a magazine, but still very cool. His book is really cool as well. So anyway, today we're gonna talk a little bit about lens choice. So most people start off with cameras with kit lenses. They're like the most basic lens that comes on every camera, especially if you have, I guess if you have a camera that has a lens that's not removable, that's just kind of considered a kit lens in a sense. And then we're gonna talk a little bit about upgraded lenses, which are wide angles, standard zoom, telephotos, and primes. These are not like official names for lenses in any capacity. It's just kind of what I call them or categorize them as. And then we'll talk a little bit about specialty lenses to skateboarding, which are kind of gonna be the fisheye and the ultra wide, and we'll get into like when those are used and why. And I'll show you some examples as well on the camera that I have here with me. So on the two cameras that are filming us right now, there's a 24-70 on each one. And that is like the most standard focal length you can have in any camera. It's the most common you're gonna buy. And they vary. Some have like a smaller aperture, like an f2.8, which gives less, like less depth of field. Something they call bokeh, which is like the word background and the little circles that are there. Those lenses tend to be sharper. They tend to be a lot more expensive. You do not need something like that to start off with. You'll end up buying one later, but to start, that is not necessary at all. Neither is necessarily a bigger lens like this 70-200, which I don't think that a lot of people will need right off the bat, but these are super nice to shoot longer shots. The one on the right is actually shot with a 400mm lens. I don't have one of those here today because I rented it for that shot, but I was up on a hill way far back from the skater because I wanted to frame the ocean in the background, and I needed to be up high to get the ocean at this spot in Santa Cruz. So for me, that was the only way I could shoot that. We had scattered it out before, couldn't do it with the 200 without it being a little tiny speck. And so that little tiny speck didn't really work, so I rented something to shoot. And I think that that is super important, that you don't need to own every single lens to shoot something. You can always rent a lens for those specialty moments. So talking about specialty lenses, every single photo shot here is with a fisheye. And so does anybody know kind of what a fisheye lens is or has an idea? They usually have 180 degrees of view in one direction. It's on the horizontal plane. Unless you turn it this way, then it's on the vertical plane. And then this way, it's only about 130. So it's not a full 180 in both directions. It's a little bit different. And so these can see everything in the room. These can shoot, 180 degrees. I can see from the edge of that board over there all the way to the edge of that board over here, just in this one room with this one lens. And so the closer you get, the more exaggerated things get. So I'm probably, I don't know, I'd say about maybe 12 inches from this concrete edge right here. And that gives that crazy scoop all the way up and over my head and frames the entire shot. So that's that leading line. This one I'm probably about 1.5 feet from the bench, and that keeps the tree in frame. And this one, the lens is pointed down at the coping, so I have a leading line coming in to lead you into the skater, right? So that comes back to what we were talking about with composition and shooting photos. So anyway, you can see on this photo that this is a very, I don't know if I want to say a wide shot, but it's a wider shot to include compositionally like everything that went into this. So you see him coming down in from over there on the flat and then up, grinding up the rail and popping off.
Would you say that fisheye makes transition look bigger though? Or
it can.
Stairs bigger?
It can, and I think that it is an interesting idea when you're playing with it, right? Like, for instance, this photo right here has, not that big of a bank. This is probably 3 foot tall, but this is shot with my guess would be, and I don't know the person that shot this or how they shot it, but just looking at it, I would say it's shot with something like that 70 to 200, probably close to 200. And arguably it might look like there's shallow depth of field here, but those lenses actually do what's called compression. And so when you zoom in to 200 and there's all this compression, it starts to blur out the background and flatten everything down, and it brings the skater out and they pop like crazy. So these bigger zoom lenses can really help define a spot if you need to separate them from the background. And there's so much going on in this photo, but yeah, you can see them. And also flash helps that a lot too in this photo. But I think that the fisheye, especially on smaller stuff, can help. But if it's a bank like this, it's not going to bend the bank the right way. A quarter pipe, yes, or a rail that is like really high or is really weird, like the double rails. Those ones I think can be really cool fisheye if you're underneath them and under the skater. Those can be really, really powerful as a fisheye. But if you're trying to show like the length of something, not always with a fisheye, because the steps kind of get weird and you can't count them all because they're kind of like compressed at the top, compressed at the bottom. So I think it creates an interesting question when you're out there, like, how do I want to frame this? And it takes thinking about that initially when you get out there to decide what lens you're going to shoot with, how you're going to frame it. And I think visualization for me helps a lot anyway. I'm like, what do I want to see this photo as? Like, do I want to see this as like an up close, because that rail is pretty tall, but he goes on from the shorter side. So like, do I want to see how tall that rail is, like by sitting right next to it? Or do I want to show like the context of the area as well? And I think that Anthony Acosta does that really well with showing like what is there and what they're actually skating, along with like the area around it.
Do you prefer to shoot fisheye or like a longer focal length?
I mean, again, I think it depends on the moment, right? If it really warrants the fisheye, I'll go for it. Fisheye is usually the last thing I'll pick up in my bag, because if you're not shooting super duper close, which I even find myself being guilty of this, not shooting close enough with the fisheye, then you kind of defeated the point of shooting with that fisheye. So if you're not touching the coping, like that shot with his hand, I mean, his hand's 3 inches from my camera. That's why I said he hit me when he fell, because his arm went right into the camera and smacked me in the face. So like, if that's not your intention when you're shooting the shot, to get that close, to get that shot, because even when he comes in, his board is almost hitting me in the head as he comes in, because he's coming up and over this way towards me. Then I think the longer lens can be more powerful, because look you can't see how tall this ramp is on the fisheye. You can't see all the context of where it's at, but here you see it goes to vert for 1.5 feet. And you can see all the, especially if they have like a lot of places have colorful tiles at the parks or at a backyard pool, then that's going to show like all that color there. And so you have that option of like playing with like what you're trying to tell about the spot and the skater and what they're doing. Like, is it really high? Is it really low? But yeah, I think a fisheye is going to always be my last choice, just because I think I want to like include more of the scene.